Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, every video we make starts with something you've seen 1,000 times on the road and ends with you understanding something about it that most people never find out. Today's video is one that surprised even me when I went deep on it, because what looks like a simple cab feature turns out to be connected to federal law, billion-dollar supply chains, and a technology development happening right now that nobody in the mainstream is talking about. Stay all the way to the end. Section 7 is where it gets genuinely unexpected. It's 3 a.m. on Interstate 40 somewhere in the Texas Panhandle. The highway is empty in both directions. No other headlights. Just flat road and stars and a Freightliner Cascadia doing 67 miles per hour with 44,000 pounds of insulin in a refrigerated trailer behind it. Inside the cab, a driver named David has been at the wheel since Albuquerque. His hands are loose on the wheel. His eyes are moving mirror, road, on the automatic rhythm of someone who has done this for 11 years. The temperature display on the dash shows 34 degrees in the trailer. Right where it needs to be. The delivery window at the hospital distribution center in Dallas opens at 6 a.m. He has just under 3 hours of legal driving time left. 6 feet behind him, separated by a curtain, a woman named Sandra is asleep in the top bunk. She has been asleep since Amarillo. In 2 hours and 45 minutes, her alarm will vibrate on her wrist. She will climb down, swap with David, who will be in the bunk within 4 minutes of stopping the truck, which they will not actually stop, and she will drive the final leg into Dallas. The insulin will arrive at 5:52 a.m. 8 minutes inside the delivery window. Continuous cold chain documentation from Newark to Dallas. 2 drivers, 0 stops. 1 second bunk that was never empty for the entire 1,600 miles. That second bunk is what this video is about, not as a comfort feature, not as a nice-to-have. As the load-bearing element of an entire category of American freight that most people don't know exists, and as the answer to a question the trucking industry has been solving since 1938. To understand why team driving exists, you need to understand the regulatory math that makes solo driving physically insufficient for certain freight. And that math starts with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration's hours of service rules. A solo commercial truck driver in the United States can operate a maximum of 11 hours behind the wheel within a 14-hour window from the start of their shift. After that, they are legally required to take 10 consecutive hours off duty before they can drive again. The digital tachograph in every modern commercial truck records every minute and is fully auditable by DOT inspectors at weigh stations nationwide. Violations carry fines, carrier safety rating points, and in serious cases, license suspension. There is no workaround, there is no flexibility. The clock runs whether you want it to or not. Now run the numbers. At a realistic highway average of 60 miles per hour, accounting for fuel stops, weigh stations, and traffic, a solo driver covers 600 to 650 miles in 11 hours. Then the truck parks for 10 hours minimum. In a 24-hour period, 11 hours moving, 10 hours stationary, 3 hours absorbed by fueling, paperwork, and loading. The truck is earning 0 revenue for more than half of every day. Los Angeles to New York is 2,800 miles. At 650 miles per driving day, a solo driver needs a minimum of 4.5 days, often 5 in real conditions. A load picked up Monday morning in Newark arrives Friday or Saturday at best. Now put a second driver in that bunk. David drives 11 hours, Sandra sleeps. David hits his legal limit and climbs into the bunk, already inside the moving vehicle, no commute, no hotel, immediately beginning his 10-hour rest period. Sandra is rested, legal, and already at the wheel. The truck does not stop, it has not stopped. Daily distance jumps to 1,100 to 1,200 miles, nearly double. Chicago to Los Angeles under 2 days instead of 3.5. Newark to Dallas, done in 1 continuous overnight instead of 2 days with a hotel stop. A $4,500 flat rate load that was supposed to take 5 days delivers in under 3. The second bunk doesn't add comfort. It converts federally mandated dead time into highway miles. Every hour Sandra sleeps is an hour David can legally drive. Every hour David sleeps is an hour Sandra can legally drive. The truck never waits for either of them. For most freight, team driving is a competitive choice. Faster delivery, better rates, stronger customer relationships. For a specific category of load, team driving is not a choice. It is the only physically viable option. And understanding what those loads are shows you how deeply the two-bunk system is embedded in American daily life. Start with pharmaceutical cold chain, the category David and Sandra are running tonight. Insulin, certain cancer drugs, vaccines. Temperature-sensitive biologics. All require continuous documented temperature compliance from the moment they leave the manufacturer's facility to the moment they arrive at the destination. The FDA is explicit. Any documented break in the cold chain can void an entire shipment, requiring destruction and replacement. A solo driver parking overnight at a truck stop is 10 hours of stationary risk. A team truck in continuous motion, with the reefer unit running and both drivers monitoring, keeps that chain unbroken for the entire route. For hospital systems managing medication schedules for patients, that documentation isn't a preference. It is a regulatory and liability requirement. Fresh produce operates under equally unforgiving constraints. Strawberries harvested at a California farm begin degrading from the moment they're picked. USDA grading is time-sensitive, grade A at harvest, declining with every hour in transit. A 5-day solo run from California to a Chicago distribution center arrives with meaningfully less margin than a 3-day team run. In a market where grocery retailers are measuring quality at intake and charging back carriers for below-spec product, that margin difference is the difference between a profitable run and a loss. Live animal transport has federally mandated welfare caps on total transit time, specific hour limits by species that a solo driver cannot always meet on cross-country routes. Military and government contract loads carry financial penalty clauses structured to make late delivery more expensive than the entire profit margin on the run. Carriers who bid on those contracts price team driving into their rate. The alternative is absorbing penalties that cost more than the team premium. This is why expedited freight exists as its own category: FedEx Custom Critical, Panther Premium Logistics, Echo Global Logistics. They don't just offer faster shipping. They sell a guarantee: your load will not park overnight. The team cab is the physical infrastructure behind that guarantee. The next day Amazon delivery that crossed 3 state lines while you slept, 2 people in shifts. The pharmaceutical shipment that arrived at your hospital pharmacy before the morning shift. Left Newark at 11 p.m. with 2 drivers and a second bunk that was never empty. Here's a distinction that most people outside the freight industry have never heard, and it matters for understanding how American logistics actually works at scale. Team driving and relay trucking both solve the same problem. How do you move freight faster than one driver's hours of service allow? But they solve it differently, with different cost structures, different risk profiles, and different freight types they can and cannot serve. Team driving is one truck, one load, 2 drivers who never leave the cab simultaneously. The truck does not stop for rest. Driver A sleeps while driver B drives. They rotate every 8 to 11 hours. The load moves continuously from pickup to delivery with no stops, no handoffs, no gaps in custody or temperature or documentation. Maximum speed. Maximum cost per mile: you are paying 2 drivers to cover the same geography at the same time. Relay trucking works differently. The truck stops, but at a dedicated hub terminal rather than a rest area. Driver A picks up in Chicago, drives to a terminal in Kansas City, parks the truck, hands over the keys, and a fresh driver B who has been resting at that hub takes it forward to Denver. Driver C picks it up in Denver and takes it to LA. The load moves through the network like a relay race. Each driver runs their leg, hands off, and either returns home or rests at the terminal. No single driver covers the full distance. Relay is significantly cheaper per mile in dense freight corridors. You're not paying 2 salaries to cover the same geography simultaneously. Each driver works closer to home, has a more predictable schedule, and the turnover cost, which is enormous in trucking, runs lower in relay operations than in team operations. For Chicago to St. Louis, Dallas to Houston, Atlanta to Charlotte, relay hubs turn trucks fast enough that the time gap versus team driving is small and the cost savings are real. But relay has a structural vulnerability: the hub stop. Every terminal handoff introduces delay, even a short one. There is a chain of custody gap every time a load sits with a driver who wasn't present at loading. The load does stop, however briefly. And for anything time-critical, cold chain, pharmaceutical, live animals with welfare caps, military contracts with hard delivery windows, that stop is disqualifying. Relay is cheaper. Team is faster. The cargo decides the method. That is the actual decision framework the industry uses every time a load gets assigned. The two-bunk sleeper cab didn't appear fully formed. It was built over 80 years of regulatory change, driver labor pressure, and engineering iteration, and the early version of it was genuinely brutal in ways that are worth sitting with for a moment. Before 1938, federal hours of service rules for commercial truck drivers in the United States did not exist. A carrier could legally require a driver to operate for 20 consecutive hours. Not as an emergency measure, as standard operating procedure. The crash statistics from that era were catastrophic, and by the mid-1930s, insurance companies were refusing to write policies on certain long-haul routes because the fatality rate was too high to price. The ICC enacted the first mandatory HOS rules in 1938. Suddenly, the industry had a math problem it had never faced. If a driver can only run limited hours, how do you keep coast-to-coast freight moving? The answer was slip-seat operations, 2 drivers, 1 truck, but the sleeping arrangement was not a bunk, it was a cot. A steel frame cot bolted directly to the cab structure. No suspension. No insulation, no separate climate system. Drivers sleeping on steel attached to a running diesel engine at highway speed, in noise environments comparable to standing next to industrial machinery, for 8 to 10 hours at a stretch. That was the first generation of the second bunk. Then comes the part that genuinely changes how you see the whole era. Through the 1940s and into the late 1950s, some operators logged what their own internal records called stretch shifts. The off-duty driver, officially, legally documented as resting, was expected to navigate watch mirrors and wake the driving partner if conditions changed. Active work logged as sleep. For 2 decades, a legal rest period in American trucking could include working. The dot didn't close that loophole until 1962. The modern sleeper cab, insulated bunk, blackout curtains, independent climate control, air-suspended mattress, didn't become standard equipment until the late 1970s. When Kenworth and Peterbilt began competing on bunk quality as a driver recruitment feature. The driver shortage of that era was severe enough that manufacturers realized the sleeping environment had to be genuinely livable or team drivers would quit and take solo runs instead. The comfort that looks standard in a modern cab today is the direct result of 40 years of people sleeping on vibrating steel while being logged as off-duty. Let's talk honestly about what team driving actually costs the people doing it, because the industry's communication around team operations emphasizes the pay premium and is quieter about what that premium is compensating for. Sleeping in a moving truck is not sleeping, not the way you sleep in a bed in a quiet room. The engine runs continuously at highway RPM. Road vibration transmits through the frame and into the bunk regardless of suspension quality. Modern air ride systems dampen it significantly, but cannot eliminate it. Light shifts every few minutes as the truck passes under highway signs, overpasses, and oncoming headlights. Sound intrudes, the engine note changing on grades, the driver making a brief radio call, the sound of the CB, road noise shifting as the truck changes lanes. The biological systems that your body uses to evaluate safety before allowing deep sleep, the systems that listen for predators and register environmental change, do not turn off at 70 miles per hour. They stay active, and they fragment your sleep cycles as a direct result. Sleep studies conducted specifically on team truck drivers show consistently more fragmented sleep architecture than solo drivers parked in a still cab. The total hours logged as rest look identical on paper. The restorative quality is measurably lower. Experienced team drivers who have done both describe it clearly. A 10-hour rest in a parked truck feels different from a 10-hour rest in a moving one. The difference accumulates over weeks. Underneath the sleep quality issue is something harder to quantify but more immediately felt. Lying flat in the dark at 70 miles per hour, trusting someone you may have known for 3 weeks to make every decision for the next 8 hours. Every lane change, every brake input. Every judgment call about road conditions and weather and traffic is a specific psychological experience that solo driving does not produce. Most team drivers adapt to it, a meaningful percentage never fully do. The interpersonal dimension is real and shows up directly in carrier turnover data. 2 people sharing 36 square feet of moving space for weeks at a time, managing incompatible sleep schedules, different temperature preferences, hygiene habits, eating routines. Personal communication styles, generates friction that driver surveys consistently identify as a top reason for leaving team operations. The American Trucking Associations reports team operation turnover rates running measurably higher than solo operation rates at most carriers. Some driver pairs work together for years and describe it as the best professional partnership of their careers. Others fall apart inside 2 weeks. The variables that determine which outcome you get are mostly invisible before you're already in the cab together for the first overnight run. The pay is real. Experienced team drivers on premium expedited freight earn $75,000 to $95,000 per driver annually, sometimes more on specialized pharmaceutical or government contract routes. That is competitive compensation for the American trucking market. It is compensation for something specific. Understanding what that something is belongs in any honest conversation about the job. Here's the section I told you about at the start, the one that genuinely surprised me and that I haven't seen covered anywhere else in the way it deserves to be covered. When most Americans think about autonomous trucks, they picture a fully driverless vehicle rolling down I-10 with nobody inside. That image is the long-term destination. It is not the commercial reality happening right now on American roads. The commercial reality right now looks completely different, and it involves the second bunk in a way that nobody outside the autonomous vehicle industry is discussing. The first actual commercial deployments of autonomous trucking technology in the United States are not driverless operations. They are supervised operations. One human safety operator sits in the driver's seat, monitoring the automated driving system, legally responsible for the vehicle, ready to take control the moment the situation demands it. And a second human operator rests in the bunk, available to rotate into the safety operator seat when the first operator's hours run out or when fatigue requires a swap. The autonomous system drives the highway miles. The humans provide the legal compliance framework, the regulatory coverage, and the capacity to handle everything the autonomous system isn't yet certified or capable of managing. Kodiak Robotics is structuring its commercial freight operations in Texas around exactly this model. Waymo Via is doing the same on specific route segments. The autonomous platform handles the straight, predictable, well-mapped stretches of interstate. The human operators manage the terminal approach, the dock maneuver, the unexpected weather event. The construction zone with flaggers, the situations where the technology's operational design domain ends and human judgment takes over. Here is what makes this remarkable from the perspective of the second bunk, under current FMCSA regulations. Any commercial vehicle operating on a public road with a human operator present is subject to hours of service rules. A supervised autonomous truck with one safety operator is, legally, a truck with one driver, subject to the same 11-hour limit as any other commercial vehicle. Add the second operator and the second bunk, and the supervised autonomous truck becomes a legal team operation. The truck can run the same continuous schedule that David and Sandra are running on I-40 tonight. 2 operators, rotating shifts, truck moving continuously, federal compliance maintained. The second bunk, that feature that was bolted as a steel cot into a cab in 1938 to solve the HOS math problem, is now the legal compliance architecture that makes the first generation of commercial autonomous freight viable under existing federal law. The engineers at Kodiak and Waymo didn't design around the bunk, they designed around the regulations, and the regulations pointed directly at it. The 2-bunk cab may outlive human team driving entirely, not as a relic. As the framework that brings autonomous freight into legal commercial operation in a country whose regulations were written for humans, the truck wasn't designed around a person. It was designed around a schedule. And the schedule, it turns out, looks the same whether the person in the driver's seat is human or supervised automation. Back to David and Sandra. It's 5:47 a.m. Sandra is at the wheel. David is asleep in the top bunk. The Dallas skyline is visible ahead. The temperature in the trailer has held at 34 degrees for 19 straight hours. The documentation is unbroken. The delivery window opens in 13 minutes. At 5:52 a.m., Sandra pulls into the hospital distribution center. A dock worker waves her into Bay 7. She backs the trailer in on the first attempt. The dock door opens. The insulin begins unloading. Inside the cab, David doesn't wake up. His rest period has 4 hours left. In 4 hours, they'll have a new load assignment, probably heading back east, probably team operation, probably something that can't stop. The second bunk in that Freightliner was never empty for 19 hours. And somewhere in America right now, at this exact moment, there are thousands of trucks with second bunks that are never empty either. Refrigerated Walmart trucks on I-80 with one driver watching lane markers and one driver flat on their back. Pharmaceutical loads running I-95 overnight. Government contract convoys that cannot legally stop on a public shoulder. Race car haulers with a morning event start time. Christmas trees that left Oregon 2 nights ago. Every one of them running on the same answer to the same math problem that the American trucking industry has been solving since 1938. A second driver, a second bunk, a truck that does not stop. Now you know what's actually happening inside those cabs when you pass them at 3 a.m. on the highway. Welcome back to the channel, and if this is your first video, subscribe. Every week we take something you see on the road every day and show you the full story behind it. The real story is almost always bigger than you'd expect. Drop a comment. Before this video, did you know some trucks have 2 beds inside? And if you've ever had to share a small space with someone for weeks at a time, tell me how that went. The comments on this one are going to be good.